Hi guys, this is MJ, and I know I've been gone for so long since my last video. But I kind of decided on shooting another one, and I was thinking of what kind of video I was going to do today, and I thought, why not make a video about the 16 types and their underrated traits. So I'm sorry for being gone for so long. I cannot promise that I'll be back and will be consistent and all. But I think while I have the will to post more or post another one, then might as well make a video. Um, so I made a post back then about the 16 types and their underrated traits. And I wrote this because there are a lot of characteristics or skills or gifts that each types has that isn't being highlighted very often in the type community, especially in the memes, usually poking fun at the common stereotypes that each type possess. And so I was thinking that I would go in depth in that post that I made a few months ago. I'll probably put it somewhere here. Um, and I'll just go through each one like top of mind. And so I don't really have any cheat sheet or anything other than the post itself. So, okay. So the first one is INFPs. I wrote INFPs to be analytical and competitive. Analytical for INFP's ability to really see the different sides of a situation, their ability to penetrate through somebody. I think which is the gift of an FI user, especially when the person is healthy or maturing or have really developed their primary functions. So I think one of the underrated traits that FI users have, so this is not just exclusive to INFPs, is really their analytical nature, um, especially when it's not really clouded by their personal judgments or beliefs. So that's one. And then the second would be their competitive nature, which is also working to their detriment because um, they're competitive against themselves, not so much really with other people. We're really prone to imposter syndrome, and I would know this myself as an INFP who really overthinks a lot of the things that I expect from my own work to the point where I end up not doing it, which is really not a good thing. So, as an example, my posts or my videos, I took forever to really put them out or to do something because I want them to look a certain way or to be done a certain way or to be shot a certain way, and then I ended up not posting them. So I guess though we're competitive, one of the things that you can expect though from an INFP who will actually do something about what they're good at, such as like Wes Anderson or like Bong Joon-ho, like artists who actually put out their work, is by actually doing the work and then putting them out there. So this is one of the reasons why I always encourage INFPs to um, shoot videos, make that art, post them, like put it out there. And this is something that I also try to heed um, the advice that I give them because I have a hard time doing this myself. And that's why I'd be on and off on social media or doing any form of content or art as I'm an artist myself. So when it's good, it's good. When you're competitive, you're able to really come up with a brilliant work of art or writing or whatever it might be. If it's like helping other people, then do your practice, finish school, and find a way to really give your gifts to the world. So I think that's one of the things. And I guess in addition to the whole analytical thing is that I think FI is very often watered down into hypersensitivities, which isn't exactly really what just the function is. Authenticity and all of that is well and good, but I think when we really just shut off that side of ourselves, we're really able to look at things in a different way. that sometimes makes these INFPs come across as INTP like, or get mistyped as an INTP or an INFJ, because a lot of these traits are very often associated with only thinkers or like NI-DOMs, which isn't actually the case. So I think that's one of their underrated traits. Okay, the second one is ENFP. So I put tenacity and that they're entrepreneurial. Tenacity, I have put it there because a lot of people think that ENFPs are just these head in the clouds, woo woo, like puking rainbows kinds of people. But in actuality, they're very fierce. They know what they want sometimes. And when they do know what they want, they go after them. So a lot of business people, like let's just say Ariana Huffington, or even Ellen, or like one of these talk show hosts that are very well known ENFPs, tend to really go after what they want. And when they're really good at it, they become very fiercely involved in the process, in the creative process, and they compete against themselves, other people, and they want to be the best in what they do. And so I put this here because a lot of ENFPs are, also being portrayed as just this head in the clouds, floating Labradors or like golden retrievers, and so people overlook that they're actually smart as well, which is tied into the whole entrepreneurial side of them. I think the bane of and the bane of like the NE DOMs in general is that they have a hard time finishing tasks and very often just start projects and they get distracted and they don't do so much about their all of these ideas. But the good thing is that they have the ability to actually go after what they want and do something out of their gift only if they stick by it. So similar to other intuitive perceivers, ENFPs are one of those that can actually excel in business and entrepreneurship if they actually put their mind into it and are going to be consistent and disciplined about this side of themselves or to their craft. So I know that we all get easily distracted, especially being NE users. So I think this is one of the things that is overlooked. That's something that I think I admire also about ENFPs, or that they should be known for more. So yes, okay. So next would be ENFJ's unyielding and a problem-solving nature. So I would say that by being a judging type and also having an eye and all that, you already by default are unyielding. But I think this is overlooked because people very often just look at the ENFJs as people pleasers who are charismatic and all of these very stereotypical traits as well. But one of the good things about being unyielding is that you're actually making a difference in this world that I think a lot of people also overlook. And so this is one of the things that I also appreciate about ENFJs. A lot of their traits are focused on being of service to other people, but they're actually good problem solvers as well. Yes, they have TI, and it's actually helpful to them, even if it's an inferior TI. The fact that you have TI in your first four, when it develops, then it helps you be really good at honing in that skill, which is really looking at logical inconsistencies, loopholes, like how to solve problems that will be greater or be of service to the real world. So creating solutions that will help humanity, but will also apply their skills in trying to figure out what the problems that are need to be solved. So a lot of ENFJs tend to be in the tech industry as well. So I think a lot of people forget that they are actually good at engineering. They could be good at engineering. They don't just have to be in philanthropic or creative pursuits. And that's one of the things that are often overlooked in ENFJs. They're not just these like family, like dad, of mom of the group kind of people. But they're actually making a difference. And this is something that they could do only if they actually recognize the power that they hold as well. Next would be INFJs. So I put in here strategic and quiet determination. So I think one of the one of the things that I would like to note first off is really considering if you're an INFJ. So I'm talking about people who have NI, FE, TI, and SE. Okay, so if you truly are an INFJ, when I mean strategic, people overlook that INFJs are not just these messianic people saving people who like do counseling and all that, or who make like theories about frameworks and all that. They're not just always in psychology or in the fields of non-profit or like helping the world in the way that people are imagining. Some of them are in the creative field making a difference, and I think people forget that INFJs can be in any field that they want, and people will not notice that. And very often, they are the ones at the top or excel in their field, especially when they're older again. Because when they have set a vision for themselves, they actually have the ability to do it because they will make it happen no matter what. By hook or by crook, they will make their dreams into a reality, which is sometimes a problem when they get really clouded by what they want. But for the most part, that TI and that NI and that discipline that they possess really enables them to become very good at strategy because they're able to foresee potential problems, potential struggles that they might encounter, and able to eliminate them or to go around them and really be able to fulfill the vision that they have for themselves or for other people or for humanity. So this is also tied with the quiet determination that INFJs have. Very often they let the work speak for itself. Of course, sometimes they'd post about it, they'd put it on their LinkedIn page, but for the most part they work behind the scenes, they carry on their plans, and they actually make the vision into a reality. They do the work, and so they don't really have to make a loud bang, but you'll just be surprised that they've been there all along doing the work and now excelling in what they do, whether it be in non-profit, whether it be in their business or in their creative field, or even in tech or in science. So the only, I guess, downside that I often see is that when they have a tunnel vision, they have a hard time letting go of what they have envisioned themselves doing, which can be unnerving to them when things don't go their way. But the good thing about being strategic is that they're able to actually still find a way to make it happen. So when they're determined, they're gonna make it happen. So that's really it. Okay, next would be INTP. I have put altruistic and visionary for INTPs. The reason why I put altruism for INTPs is that people overlook that they also possess FE. Doesn't matter if they have Dibon FI, but similar to the FI function, TI is there to solve a problem, to find loopholes, to find illogical inconsistencies, and they solve problems that will benefit humanity. Look at crypto, DeFi, Linux, like everything benefits a group of people. Open source, Wikipedia, it helps a certain group of people. But this is tied into them being visionaries that is often associated only with NI-DOMs. But in actuality, similar to, say, Bill Gates, the things that they do often are of service to humanity without actually getting involved so much with people. They always think about the community, the group, which is like tied into inferior FE. They don't necessarily want to engage with people, but they're actually, in a way, closeted humanitarians, is how I would describe it. This is only good, this is only apparent if they actually do the work. Very often, people associate niceness, kindness, helpfulness to feelers. But that's something that is not exclusive to feeler types, whether FI or FE. Altruism is actually something that I have personally seen in INTPs. They care, but they don't show it in the way that people would expect. They will come across as rude, they will come across as mean, but they're actually very caring people, um, especially to their, loved ones and whatever. But most especially with what they think will be helpful to the greater community. So that's one of the things that I personally appreciate about INTPs. So my encouragement is really to just do the work, you know, quick, because you don't want to be like another wasted potential, as many would think about in peace in general. So that's one of those things that I think are underrated traits. Next would be ENTJ. I have put fairness here and helpful. So there are a lot of stereotypes about ENTJs. It's not a surprise when people make memes about money hungry, power hungry. I do it myself and I post about it myself. And I think that's the harshness of TE. But one of the things that I admire about ENTJs is that they're actually quite fair. Not fair in the workplace, just also fair in general as much as possible. What you get what you worked hard for. They reward those who deserve it. They also are, in a way, I would say, as closeted humanitarians, similar to INTPs. Having FI in your inferior also means that there's going to be an urge to help people, to like grow a potential. And so this is now tying in with the helpfulness that I see in ENTJs, because I'm also friends with some ENTJs, and though they can be harsh in the workplace, okay, like pretty intense. They can be very harsh in the workplace. They can be very cutthroat because they want results. They want that bag. But for the most part, if you are friends with an ENTJ, your family with an ENTJ, they're actually very helpful, because I know of like a friend who's an INFP as well, one of my friends. Her sister's an ENTJ, and that ENTJ would do whatever it takes to kind of help her sister make money out of her artistic skills. And I think this is similar to other people that they have worked with in the workplace. They are good mentors, especially when they're not clouded with their desire to climb up the ladder, or to just simply make money. When they develop a certain, when they develop FI, this can kind of help them balance out this just simple, not really simple, but this desire to just succeed, hit the result, hit the KPI, make that money, and all of these other things. So they're fair in a way where they treat people ideally, assuming that they're healthy. So all of the things that I'm talking about will really vastly depend on how healthy or young or mature these types are. But they're actually, I find them to be very fair. They don't treat people differently. They're actually quite respectful. Again, assuming that they're balanced out or developing. But for the most part, they actually love helping people reach their potential. And probably that's why they mesh well with INPs in general, because they can see how good these people can be. They just need that push. And I usually get that push actually myself as an INFP from the ENTJs, INFJs, and ENTPs of my that are in my life. So they're very helpful, and I think it goes without saying that whatever they set their mind into, they can make their dreams into a reality as well. And so it's not really one of those underrated traits. I really just like to highlight that they're actually very helpful in general and can be kind. So I appreciate that about ENTJs. So the only downside is that when they prioritize results over kindness or over, you know, over the human itself. So I think that's one of the things that I would like to note. Okay, next would be ENTP. I have put here strong-willed and generosity. Strong-willed. One of my best friends, or one of my longest friends, like I've been friends with since I was like 8 or something, is an ENTP, 8 wing 7. She is a stereotypical devil's advocate. Like, like there is no time where we don't argue about something. Well, especially me being an FI dom, I do not like arguing with anybody as much as possible. I discuss with people, I don't argue with them, but they're very generous. I mean, the fact that she's debating with me or that she argues with me or like points out a flaw is one of her ways of expressing love and care. One of the ways that I have seen ENTPs to be very strong-willed is when they have decided that they want to do something, they will do whatever it takes to make it happen. So shout out to that friend. She's now she's like now trying to become a doctor, and she's also a dentist and all of that. Like, she is, because of that desire for freedom from the system, not really from the system, but like freedom from life, responsibilities that that are, she doesn't want to be a part of the system in the way that a lot of types fall into. She creates and forges her own path, and the kind of success that she wants for herself, she creates and does her on her own, even if it's very difficult. I can imagine how difficult this is for NE users to just be put in one place. But some NE users actually benefit from the structure that inferior SI is able to provide. So for instance, like now having a set career in medicine as an example, they will excel in that path and they will make sure that it'll happen. So that's where the will is. Like, even when she's high on self-belief. So self-belief as in like in the Gallup Strengths Finder. She, even when she falls, she stands back up and dusts herself and then just continues on with the journey. And so that's what I admire about her, even if she's like a literal goldfish like me in the real world, like gets distracted. There's just so many things happening, like going on in our lives, but she has remained in her path. And I've seen this in other ENTPs in my life. They do business, they try, they fail, they do it again. So they don't really stop. And I think that will is something I admire about, because as sometimes you just want to give up, but they don't. And so that's something I admire about them. And what else? Okay, generosity. This is one of their underrated traits because it's one of those, again, closeted humanitarian traits that I've seen in ENTPs or INTPs also and other thinkers. They're actually very generous. They don't want people to know this. I'm so sorry for like outing you guys, but real NETI, FE, SI users can be very generous to their family, to their friends, and to animals. They have a soft spot for animals and for the very, very, very small people that they have let in their social circle. And they usually know and can count that in their fingers. They're usually the type to kind of rank their friends. But if you're in that friend group, you're lucky because they will do anything for you. They will, they're not a very affectionate in the way that you would want them to be, but they express that very often through giving, especially when they have the means to. If they have the last piece of bread, they're gonna give it to you if they actually could. I think that's the best way I could describe it. And so I love ENTPs for that. However, if you're not really close with them, I'm not sure how it's gonna be. But for the most part, they're very generous to their family, friends, and to animals. That's one of the things I admire about them. Otherwise, I think the problem that I can foresee about ENTPs um, being strong-willed is sometimes they take failure to heart, and they associate that with, or they link that to their self-esteem. They would never admit this unless you're like their bestest friend or something, but it's one of the things that they take to heart. So though they don't say it, they also get discouraged, and that puts them in a loop or in a grip. Okay. Next would be INTJs. I have put open-minded here and non-discriminatory. Okay, how do I explain this? INTJs can seem or come across as close-minded. I don't know why people might have an impression that these evil masterminds are very narrow and rigid. I think that's one thing that a lot of people might think of them, or how they might come across. And they can be very rigid. This is not to say that they aren't, but even if they are, they're actually open to being persuaded. If your arguments make sense, they can be open to being wrong, assuming that you're a healthy INTJ. A lot of INTJs are intellectually arrogant. That's not a surprise to thinkers as well. But very often maturing and INTJs who has a developing FI will have the humility to accept correction or to entertain other multiple ideologies or ideas in general. So even if they have a vision of what they want, and this is what they're headed towards, if you actually inject some kind of new idea, or like there's something wrong with this approach, they might be open to hearing you out and are actually not gonna hate you for it. Because one of the things that I like about INTJs is they don't get easily offended. I don't know if this is a benefit to having tertiary FI, but they would rather you tell them they're wrong, especially if the INTJ is a maturing, healthy INTJ, because some of them, it can be very difficult as people as well. But for the most part, the INTJs that I have met in my life can be open-minded. They will examine and pick apart what you're saying. They're gonna ruminate and think about it, but they're not gonna be argumentative or be spiteful about correction. So it's actually better if you tell an INTJ when they're wrong about something, but you have to present it in a manner that's not driven by emotion very often. But the INTJ also has to be open, otherwise they're just gonna be a dick. Non-discriminatory. Oh, they're very nice. I would say maybe not the word nice, but they treat people fairly. Whether you're rich or you're poor, they're not affected by that. They're actually the type of people, at least the ones that I know as well in my experience, whether you're rich or you're poor, they're gonna treat you with respect. Not necessarily the respect that INTJs really have for people that they admire or that they look up to, but the respect as in like they will treat you as a human being, so they're not like up there in their higher horse and like thinking that you should get them water or something. Although they would probably appreciate if you get them water. I'm kidding. But they will treat people with fairness as well. So I think that's one of the things I admire about INTJs. They don't look at you based on just your achievements or where you're at in life. They treat you nicely, um, which is, I think, some of the things that people overlook about INTJs, because INTJs get the impression that they're snobby and superior and elitists or something, but they actually aren't. They are, they think they are, or they exude that, but in actuality, like in practice, they're not. Okay, done with intuitives. Oh my god, so much talking. Next would be ISTPs. I have put committed and playful here. I have put playful because I think ISTPs get the reputation of like being so serious and like mean, I think. But they're actually not. I think TI DOMs very often are perceived as or come across as quite mean because they're very straightforward. Like they just say things as they are. That inferior FE, that like lack of social politeness, and really unable to really pick up social cues and all that. They have a hard time meshing well in a crowd, not unless you're surrounded by other thinker types, but for the most part, they can be the way they conduct themselves can be taken the wrong way. And I would know this because one of my longest friends as well from uni is an ISTP, and the stuff that she says sometimes is pretty controversial. Or not really controversial, but like something that you wouldn't really expect people saying in a public setting or in a supposedly sensitive matter, you know. So it's similar to INTPs. Like when you say something, you open up about something, very often their instinctive response is correction, or like, then you should do this, then you should do that. But you have to tell them actually that, you know, that's not what I want right now. I am just looking for comfort, not absolution or something like that. Which is this is applicable to all finger types as well, by the way. Committed. Okay, I think this is similar to ENTPs. Oh, they're really skillful people, whether this be in, I don't know, crypto, finance, art, business. Yeah, that's one of the things also. They're not just masterful artists or virtuosos as others would describe them, but they're actually really good in other fields as well. And whatever field that they're into, once they commit to it, they're actually gonna stick by it and they will excel. So I think this is one of the underrated traits that I also admire about ISTPs. When they get bored, when they don't feel like it, they won't do it. But this is like very often not the case. They know what they want, and they're gonna go after it, and they're gonna fulfill it, assuming that they will. You know, of course, there are a lot of people who still struggle finding what they want in life. But once they have decided or have determined what it is that they want to do in this life, very often they will excel in that line of craft. Maybe the only problem that I would see in this is that sometimes they will have a hard time exploring other things and stick with whatever they're used to, you know. So yeah, and they're playful. When you're closer with an ISTP, their humor is kind of different from, I guess, what I'm used to being an INFP, but they're actually funny. You know, they would say things that, I mean, they would say, once you're close to them, they're actually gonna be able to soften up, and like when they like you, you're gonna be able to kind of act like a child in a way. And they just know how to soften up a little bit and really just know how to take things a little more lightly and really enjoy someone's company. So they're actually the type that also, and they're actually fun to be with because they're actually down to do whatever for the most part. Also depends on the kind of ISTP that you're with, but they're very playful. You know, they're down to do whatever. I mean, they have SE, so they would be interested in doing whatever that the friend group, as an example, would be down like to do as well. So I think that's one of the things I appreciate about the ISTPs. So next would be ESTPs. One of their underrated traits is they're intellectual and they're also very compassionate. Um, a lot of ESTPs are dubbed as being Chad, like Chad, buff, like they go to the gym rat, like gym bros, like all of these other stereotypes, but they're actually very smart. And I can say this, I'm probably gonna do another video about this, but one of the closest people that I have growing up, one of my big sisters is actually an ESTP. And we've talked about this when I've broken down to her what it means to be an ESTP, based on the function and all that. Um, she's a chemist and a lawyer, and she's a baddie. Like, she's really good at drums. She was a drummer back then, and like growing up, so I was 12 when I met her, and we've been friends for a long time. And she's one of the people that I super admire because she's so competitive, not against herself but with other people, you know. But she puts herself in a high standard, and I think this is one of the underrated traits of an ESTP is that besides the fact that they're very active, which most of them are, they're actually very smart. I would even say that they're probably closeted geeks, you know, that they're very they know so much about certain topics that you would be surprised about. And I think that's the part of being a TI auxiliary person. Um, a lot of the smarts are attributed to the intuitive thinkers, but the the sensor thinker, the STs are also like this, but the more highlighted traits very often are those that belong to SE, DOMs, or SI users, but they're actually very smart, you know. So think of it as an ENTP who loves working out, you know. Think of it in that way. But they're very good business people as well. So usually, if they're not in business, they're in STEM. Some of them could also be um, doing. I already talked about them being in business. So they could be in business. They could be in the medical field. They could be a musician even. But that's one of the things that, you know, people don't often see. They always think that these people tend to be trainers at the gym or like doing all of these physical workout whatever, but they're not. Some of them are actually lawyers and they're very good at it. Next would be compassionate. Yeah, they're very compassionate people. It's one of those things that people don't see about ESTPs, that they're actually very loyal and they love. They're very caring and protective of the family and the friends, uh, and people whom they consider as like the underdog as well. So a healthier types who are healthier in general, or ESTPs, um, would actually, you'd be surprised that they'd actually be the type to actually volunteer or help out certain people or certain causes. You wouldn't see that, but they do that, you know. It's not something that people notice or think very often, but they'd be in um, events that actually do charity, or they'd raise a fund for something. They would donate their personal money for something, especially when they're well-to-do or when they are capable. And that's one of the things I've witnessed myself about ESTPs. Next would be ISFPs. So I've put in here risk takers and meticulous. Yes, risk taker. I think it's somewhat expected having SE, but INFPs in comparison very often are a little bit more cautious. Lots of imposter syndrome going on in here, but with ISFPs, they are somewhat similar, except they'd be more willing to just go after what they want. They're very competitive as well, and that comes with taking the risk. So the whole adventure type comes into play, because once they are interested in something and they want to pursue it, they will do it. And this is beneficial when they're actually doing something that they love. And again, I would describe ISFPs as one of the not really indigo child, but like one of those who refuse to actually like go with the flow. Like they would go against the current kind of people. And that would mean sometimes like living in the forest, or like, okay, that's a stereotype, but for the most part they would take that risk. That's an example for it. Not many would do that, but in the name of in the name of like what they believe in, they would fight for what they believe in, and enough to actually do something out of this world, or something that's out of the ordinary, just to show that one can do it. So I think that belief is beneficial, and also that the something that can work to their detriment only if they're not considering the repercussions of some of the things the that the things that they do. So I still suggest that you do take calculated risks and be very careful about some of the risks that they take. But still, courage is something that I admire. So I think that's helpful. Meticulous. I think a lot of receivers in general can be deemed as not really sloppy, but they don't really care so much about a lot of stuff that others would be very prickly about. But they're actually very meticulous about their work. So in a way, this is somewhat tied into perfectionism, because they're very particular about the output that they make, the things that they do. If they're a programmer, which a lot of ISFPs tend to be in as well, they actually are very particular about what they create, what they produce. So that it's a combination of that mastery and this whole wanting to do really well in the field that they're in, especially when it's something that they really enjoy doing. That's where the meticulousness comes in. So this is helpful, especially if the job requires this kind of trait. So that's one of the things I admire about ISFPs in general. Next would be ESFPs. They're very perceptive, and they have the capacity to lead. Okay, so what other stereotypes do we have about ESFPs? A lot of ESFPs are associated with like partying, like drunkenness, drugs, sex, all of that. But that's not actually the case. A lot of them tend to be very perceptive, and I would attribute that to FI. I have a friend whom I met a few years ago. He's an ESFP, and I actually had a call with him. We talk about MBTI, or personality types as well, and he knows about the cognitive function. He's actually interested in personality typing, and one would think that a lot of ESFPs get mistyped as ENFPs, but in actuality, some ESFPs are also still interested in human behavior and psychology and all of these things. So they know how to read people, they know how to analyze certain situations and look at things from different angles. It's one of their underrated traits, is their perception. They're really good at analyzing as well, and it's often overlooked because they look like these very they look like they're just flying around, floating around, like doing whatever, and with no direction. But they're actually good leaders. You know, I have one of my uncles is actually an ESFP, and he is one of the business people behind the family business and all. So because of that strong obligation to fulfill one's duty, they have a high capacity to lead. And he also DJs, so that's actually kind of funny. So some of them are in business, but also still doing a lot of SE stuff, like making music, DJing, like being at parties, like doing these other very stereotypical SE stuff. And so yeah, they can make good leaders, and they can be entrepreneurs as well. And it helps that they're very perceptive, because they will know how to approach certain situations, and not just look at things in a very superficial way. Next would be ISTJ. So I have put here sense of humor and self-sacrificial. So my dad's an ISTJ. I think this is one of the things that I find interesting about ISTJs. They can be perceived as, well, they are actually quite rigid, and they can sometimes be very serious. And the funny thing is that I think with having an NE as well, um, they can be funny. It's their sense of humor is quite different, and they usually just it can be funny, especially with like they read so much. They watch so much shows, TV, and they read so many things. They know a lot of stuff, and they get to make a joke out of the things that they know. So it's funny when NE pops in with all of that witty, quick-witted shit. It comes in the most unexpected way. Some of their jokes are quite evil, but it's still funny. And I hate it because I laugh at it sometimes. And I think that's one of the things that I got from him as well. Self-sacrificial, I think this is quite evident to a lot of ISTJs. They are willing to do most of the work for people in general. People they love, their coworkers, family, friends. Even if they do it begrudgingly, which is funny because they like to complain about it, but they still do it anyway. They do most of the work, but they actually cannot imagine not doing anything else. But that's one of the things I admire about ISTJ is that they would do the things that you wouldn't want to do. So long as you tell them ahead of time. Don't waste their time. So I think the only problem sometimes with their humor is that it can be very, very offensive. But I mean, to a lot of people, I don't think that's a problem. To me, I've gotten used to it, but it's kind of it's a lot. Next is ESTJs. I have put childlike and protective for ESTJs. A lot of ESTJs tend to be very childlike, especially when they're around their friends. In the workplace, they can seem very, very big bossish, like, know your place. I'm the boss. I don't, this is what we do. Are you doing your work? Are you like, you get paid to do the work, follow the rules kind of people. But when they're with their friends, when you're part of their inner circle, they actually tend to seem like a child. They even make I said baby sounds. Like they sound like a child sometimes. They get very playful, which is super opposite to how a lot of people perceive them, which is funny. And I think that's one of the things that I find interesting about ESTJs that I have witnessed. They get to be childlike around people they're comfortable with. And they're also very protective. People don't know this, but they would really cut a bitch if one of their friends, family gets crossed by somebody. They would do whatever it takes. They would move hell and just to protect someone that they care about. So they get the bad rap. They get bad rap for like being mean sometimes, but also the only reason sometimes that they're like this is because they're protecting someone, or you have done something that has wronged them, their family, or someone that they care about. So it's really not a good idea to mess with an ESTJ or anyone that they care about for the most part, which is kind of scary. I think that's the downside to it. ESFJs, they're very independent and philanthropic. Independent, I say this because a lot of ESFJs tend to be like fixed and tied with their family and friends. Like it makes it seem like their world revolves around these things. But in actuality, they can actually hold their own and they get to do things that they want for themselves. It's funny because one of my grandma is an ESFJ and she has lived alone most of her life happily. She gets to do whatever she wants. Like she's very old, but she's like still doing a lot of activities, leading the group for like old people in their community, and she doesn't mind not having people around her. She cares about family so much and people so much, but she doesn't need them to be around a lot of the time, which is I think a stereotype that people have with ESFJs, that they're just there helping people around, wanting people to be around, and just needing them. But in actuality, they can actually hold their own and they can be very independent. So they'd rather do things on their own if they could, and they don't need people for that. Philanthropic, I actually admire this about them. A lot of ESFJs are very helpful. This is an attribute that's often put to NFJs or NFs in general, but ESFJs and ISFJs actually tend to be very helpful as well. They're actually one of the people behind community fundraising, advocacies, like highlighting advocacies, like donating to whatever XYZ. A lot of ESFJs tend to be in that, and they do it behind the scenes. So this is one of the things I appreciate about ESFJs. They're not superficial. They're not just superficial, quote unquote. They actually care about people, and they're actually very helpful as well. It's not so much just about the glam and the glitz and the glam and the, whatever. They actually also want to help people. Okay, last but not the least, ISFJs. I've put here business acumen and inquisitive. I put business acumen because I think a lot of people stereotype ISFJs as, I don't know, as Mary Poppins or something. But actually, a lot of them are successful entrepreneurs and businessmen and women. Kylie Jenner, Kim Kardashian. Like, a lot of ISFJs are in the beauty makeup industry, doing skincare, doing like in finance and economics, and like doing all of these things. And I feel like people overlook that they also have the capacity to be very successful in this area, and not just NJs or TJs in general. So they're really good at it, and they're very successful. They have the determination. They have the ability to really predict like what works, what works best for people. For example, if it's makeup, if it's this kind of cooking, or it's whether it's in the restaurant business, or in the hospitality business, or in healthcare, they know, and they do it, consistently, and they make money out of it. So not a lot of ISTJs are being praised enough for this. They're usually just tied in with really weird conservative roles that I don't think make sense. Next is inquisitive. There are a lot of ISFJs who are also interested in typology, so which is very funny because I think a lot of people associate the interest in type or psychology as to intuitives in general, but it's actually not the case for in general, like at all. A lot of them are also interested in knowing more about people and helping other people grow and develop their skills, hone in their strengths, and yeah, one of the recent people that I've met and became friends with is an ISFJ, one of which also I have interviewed one ISFJ in this channel as well. And people mistype them as INFJs or another type because they're interested in these things. But in actuality, once you explain to them what this is, they want to know more about it. They also have DI, so of course it makes sense that they would be interested in structures and systems and all of these frameworks that could help them better themselves. So a lot of ISFJs are associated only in healthcare and helping people and in these types of industries, but they're actually also very successful in other areas. So that's one of the underrated traits that I see in all of the types. I feel like I've talked so much. I'm very tired, but I hope that you learned a lot from this video. And if you have any ideas of what kind of content that you'd like to see more of, just comment down below and let me know so I can make content out of it. And if you want to get a session, if you want to book a session to get typed by me, I do typing sessions. Just I'll put in the next clip for more details. So I do that. And then follow me on my socials. It will be on the links in my description. So bye guys. Peace. Follow me on my socials at MBTI Time on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you're not sure if you're an INFP, INFJ, ENFP, INTJ, or any other type, book a typing session with me by visiting www.mbtitime.com. Links in the descriptions down below.